Okay, so I guess one of the most obvious questions is really how you decide what gets played. I mean, for both on a show or on a station as a whole. I guess we start with you, Stuart. How do you put together that playlist, and what chance does someone have that's not signed off, or an emerging artist, of getting onto that playlist? In fact, just getting onto Capital, full stop.
Could you just do a quick show of hands? Who listens to Capital or has listened to Capital here? Put your hand up. Okay, for those people who've put your hand up, would you expect to hear unsigned music on Capital Radio? We simply don't play it. We are a top 40 station. If your band's in the top 40, we'll play it if it fits in with what we do. It's very difficult. In fact, I would say it's impossible for an unsigned act to get on mainstream Capital Radio. There are opportunities. We've just introduced a lot of new specialists listening, and the figures out today show that we beat Radio 1 and all our specialists listening, which is great for a radio station like Capital. As Richard Park said, we've got to see off the Katy Perry brigade and tell the cool people they can listen to Capital. So it seems that they found our specialist programme, and so some of that is a guy called Andy Durant, who's based in Leeds, and Mash, or based in Glasgow, and these guys play a lot of unsigned stuff, and Sasha Brooks as well. So there is opportunities for some forms of music, but to get an unsigned band on a Capital Radio playlist, almost impossible. The only example of that, something a bit different, which you can do it, and this is a really interesting success story, is Capital won't break that kind of new music. We will play Katy Perry, Rihanna, Chris Brown, all these acts. We'll play them first, and we'll play them a lot quickly. But you're familiar with Ed Sheeran's The A-Team? It's going to be one of the biggest songs on radio. We actually played that at daytime. I was amazed that we play that. And when you hear it, it's different. But our audience loves that song. That song came through from YouTube. And then it built up, and and it wouldn't go out the charts to the stage that we couldn't ignore it. So, for a lot of people, Ed Sheeran's a brand new act. So, there is the possibility of getting on Capital, but it's difficult.
Hello, I'm Stuart Barry from Capital Radio. I'm the programme controller. I look after the output of the station. I work with the presenters, coaching them every day. I help with the commercial team, making sure that we've got the best ideas for our commercial clients, and generally look after everything that comes out of the station, whether it be on air. Also get involved in a lot of the online stuff as well.
Vic, how do you decide what you play?
Well, I source my music from a load of different areas, basically like everyone else on the panel and out there. I listen to lots of stuff online, so it's laterally it was MySpace, maybe not quite so much these days, SoundCloud, Bandcamp, via Twitter, via Facebook.coms, blogs, podcasts. I listen to other people's radio shows, so I'm out there trying to find stuff all the time. I also rely a lot on people sending me their music. So if you're in a band and you think, oh, should I give Vic Galloway a CD? Should I email him with a link to my new EP or whatever? The answer is yes, you should. I cannot possibly keep on top of everything that's going on in Scotland and globally, but I do my best, and I try and find the absolute kind of cream of what's going on within each genre, especially in Scotland. Obviously, that's the remit of my program and kind of what I'm passionate about. So I'm sourcing it online, I'm getting stuff sent to me, and I'm also getting recommendations from friends. It might be guys in bands, managers, promoters, bloggers, podcasters. There's a few familiar faces out here tonight. Other people on this panel who may recommend, have you heard X, Y, and Z? I'll then go and investigate and try and get some stuff off them. From then, it's a question of me having a pile of tunes, signed, unsigned, Scottish, non-Scottish, and turning to my producer and saying, every week I send her a massive list of what I would like to play. Obviously, it's far, far too much stuff to fit into a single program, but it gives her an idea of the length and breadth of what I'm listening to.
Every station works in a different way. Every single person within a station will have his or her own take of it. And to argue about music and to debate it is the best thing, because you by and large, it does not start wars. It can cause fallouts, but argue about music and debate it, because that is what it's all about. It's what bands do when they make records. They don't just go into the studio and say, oh, we're all going to agree. They have fights about it. And one of the greatest records of all time, the Beach Boys' Smile album, was issued like 3 days ago. They recorded it in 1966 and 1967. It's taken them 44 years of arguments and technical arguments to get the record issued. So never worry about arguing about music, but everybody works in a different way. And most stations have producers and presenters. It's becoming rarer in radio, and I don't know if the panel would agree with me, but it's becoming rarer in radio for presenters to have complete control over what they play if they're on a mainstream channel, if you like. What I do, and the show that I look after now, I've done it for about 10 years now, it's called Ian Anderson. It goes out on Radio Scotland, but it's also an iPlayer, and like the other shows, it goes out all over the world. We are very, very fortunate. We have 8 hours a week of free play radio. Now that might not sound much, but if you think of what that is, it's like 8 hours of silence, which has to be filled up with stuff that's good. And we're rooted in sort of like singers and songwriters, and you might think, oh, well, that's just, James Taylor and Neil Young or Bruce Springsteen or whatever. But truly, we play stuff way, way beyond that. We'll play stuff that dates from the 1910s, and we come right up through the Carter family, the country music people, right through, yes, all your Joni Mitchells and people like that, and right out the other end into tons and tons and tons of new music. We're very fortunate. We don't have a quota. BBC doesn't impose a quota on us. But over the piece, I would say that 50% or so of the music that we play is new music, but we play the new music against the backdrop of the best of the old music to give it some kind of context. Our listeners tell us in droves what they like. I mean, and they argue about it, and we read all that stuff out on air, and then we're a late night show, but we're on iPlayer, so we can be heard all over the world at any time, basically. And people will argue about the music, and if somebody writes to us and says, we don't like this track, we hate this track, we'll read that out. We don't just say, oh, well, we're not everything's great, baby. But what we do is give music a chance. And what people do is, if you've been around a long time, people do get to know your name. But the most important thing that you've got to do, and we talked about this earlier on in the room just next door, but one of the most important things to do is to do your research and find out what kind of program this is. Because I get sent a lot of indie and punk rock, which I used to play a lot on radio, and a lot of which I still love because I grew up with a lot of it. And I'm talking about new bands. I always listen to new bands, but I can't play it on my radio show. But on the current one, but what I can do is play anything that is in folk and rock and roll and blues and singer-songwriting and country and all these vast related fields of music. We can do that on our show, and we do. But the most important thing is always, always, always listen to what the station is. What kind of station is it? It's like, is it Stuart Station who do rightly play mainstream music, or is it someone more specialist, the likes of what Vic and me, and to a certain extent Jim does as well? Do your research, because it's easy to do nowadays, and find out what kind of station it is, what kind of presenter it is, and what kind of music they're playing. And that way you start to make an inroad into it. I'm Stuart Cruikshank. I produce the Ian Anderson Show for BBC Radio Scotland, but I've been producing programmes for BBC networks for, 32 years, so I'm like the old man of rock.
My name's Vic Galloway. I present programmes for BBC Radio Scotland. Until recently I presented programmes for BBC Radio 1. I've worked for Six Music. I've done all sorts of stuff for BBC Radio Scotland. I've done bits of telly as well, and occasionally write for various newspapers and magazines and online blogs, etc. So I've been broadcasting for about 12 and a half years, and when I first went to the BBC in Glasgow, I met this man, and he is an absolute inspiration. I didn't know what to expect. I was going into a new department, a new line of work. I'd never done radio professionally in any way before. I met Stuart, and his passion, enthusiasm and knowledge was just, and still is, second to none.
Could I ask how many people have actually heard the Ian Anderson Show? Okay. And how many of you are making sort of acoustic singer-songwriter or country music? Because I mean, this is one of the reasons that, one of many reasons that I wanted to bring Stuart on, because I get bands coming up to me so often with a sort of tail between their legs, whinging that Vic hasn't, or when he was doing the Radio 1 show, his producer Muslim hadn't playlist or put one of their songs on their show. And I'm like, well, have you checked out the various other shows on Radio Scotland alone? you know, there's shows that are far more suitable for your music in the first place. And you have to remember, is it 4 nights? Yeah.
Been on Monday, Thursday,
So
4 nights a week.
you've got 4 times more chance of getting on it. And there is a band that, you know, I knew were more suitable for the Ian Anderson show. I dragged Stuart along to see them at Go North, and they ended up, what 2 or 3 times in 1 week on the show. So, you know, it's definitely something that, you know, people get too kind of fixated on just being on one show, and, you know, doing your homework is a really important part of it. And I guess, like, Grant, this is where you come into your element, because you know every single producer and show around the country. I mean, what is there somewhere people could go? Is there some sort of resource where people can maybe find the producers or find the shows that are suitable for them?
I've got to admit that, I mean, it's been my job to kind of have that knowledge that we've been talking about, knowing the right show, the Ricky Ross show on BBC Radio Scotland. I've had several artists recently, like Ryan Adams, that are perfect for that show. And the producer and I have a really good relationship because of that. And that's been my job, as well as talking to people like Stuart about daytime records. But there isn't one source, but it's not hard to find. I had a Van Morrison album, a kind of random country album he did a few years ago, and I was like, how's this going to get played on the radio? But I did my search and found loads of country radio that I didn't know existed across the UK. Made sure they all got a copy of it, and we got some success, and everybody was happy. So it's just a case of legwork, knowing contacts, looking outside of Scotland, for example. There are plenty of the BBC shows related to the Introducing Strand that do exist, BBC Tees, BBC Stoke, etc., and further south, as well as smaller stations, for example, Salford City Radio in around Manchester. There's a girl called Shell Zena on there who definitely everybody should watch out for, because she'll be big soon, because she loves music. She's finding as many ways as possible to get music and new music on air, whether it's through her radio stations or through her contacts. So just do your research, really.
My name is Grant Crane. I work for Columbia Records as a regional promotions manager. I've worked for Polydor Records before, and been in the music industry for about 17 years, which is a rather long time.
How did you feel the night went? I mean, you've been at Born to Be Wide before.
Yeah.
What was it like for you on the stage?
Well, last time I snuck in at the back of a radio event for Born to Be Wide, and I really enjoyed it. And when I was asked to come on, I thought that's a perfect opportunity. I thought it went really well. I kind of felt a bit like I was amongst talented people, and I was the least of all of them because I take the corporate dollar. It was really good, really interesting, and very diverse, which I think is really important, because you can get stuck in a rut and so many times with these kind of topics.
I play 36 records a week, maybe 12 an hour. We operate to a playlist of 15 songs, and that is sort of published to the industry and stuff as part of the in-demand playlist. So you'll have Romeo's playlist, and these are tracks that they play a few times. Then, even though my show's only on once a week, there's 15 tracks that are guaranteed that they will be played that week, and they usually stay on for a few weeks. So Andy and I sit down and work that out, and pretty much we're left to our own devices. There was one instant where Laura Marling, who we put on the playlist, was questioned as maybe perhaps not being suitable for the single of the week, because I have a single of the week as well, because because Romeo plays the track during the week, and it was quite a slow build on that particular track. But I try to be open-minded, and I also try and make it accessible, because it's a commercial station, which is generally a pop station, so they're looking at what they call a funnel, stuff to go in and hopefully progress to daytime. And the Ed Sheeran example is a perfect example, because Ed Sheeran's A-Team was my record of the week on the very first In Demand Uncut in May.
Jim Gillitley. I work for the Bauer Network in Scotland, doing a show on Fourth One and across Scotland and all the Bauer stations, bar Murray Firth Radio, who do their own thing with a lovely girl called Marion Scott. So it's all about new music for me. I also do a show on Amazing Radio, write a wee new music column for the Scottish Sun, and a podcast, Jim Gillitley's New Music